No, it's
Nervous
not.
ticks? Yeah, okay.
Not nervous tics. In fact, the the folks that you know I play Dungeons and Dragons. It's one of
Oh,
my
okay. All right. I
one of
think
our.
you might have mentioned that before.
You
Now I
might have
remember.
mentioned
Yeah.
that a time or two, yeah.
My
D&D, but
my brother's
uh,
played that over the years. I don't know if he's still doing it, but
your survivalist brother.
that's the one. Yeah. Yeah.
See, it's crazy. We're
Good
all
memory.
crazy. Well, no, I looked at his stuff. He has a lot of really good points. So I'm definitely uh of course I was a survivalist for many years, and he used to be calling them hippies, but I don't think he probably considers himself a hippie. But that's where
No.
it all came about, that here's how we're going to make sure that we survive when the revolution is over, when when the government is fallen, when all this stuff. Yeah, so
Well, I think it fits into with today's workbook lesson when one of the review, well, all of them, but
oh
certainly
yeah,
the middle one of 13 is a meaningless world engenders fear. I posted that a few places on Facebook, and
yeah,
I think that's a particularly helpful reminder that if I'm the least bit fearful or anxious or upset or in any way not peaceful about anything or anyone or any whatever, um, I've chosen the wrong teacher.
right. And
Yeah.
absolutely. In fact, today's lesson was really I love the way that Jesus strings them together. Whereas I know a lot of people, when they're doing the review lessons, they'll go back and read the original lesson. But,
Hmm.
particularly in this review, he tells us, don't go back and look at that. Look at this new stuff I'm telling you about.
Unless you're applying yesterday's lesson about being preoccupied with the past, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But if you look at how they all come together, it really is a beautiful uh, uh, stream of thinking, and to going from um, the idea, from the very beginning of nothing I see here means anything. Now we're in the whole idea of what is meaningful and meaningless. And so we have a whole lesson about my thoughts are showing me a meaningless world, and I'm upset because I'm seeing a meaningless world, and a
Hmm.
meaningless world engenders fear. But God didn't create it, it's not God's creation. And then the last thought is, my thoughts are images that I have made. So, who made the meaningless world? It would be
Which
me.
one's the prodigal, me or perfect oneness?
I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. So,
I've got us on page 360
this world. All right.
of the print version I have of Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of A Course in Miracles by Kenneth Wapnick, PhD. And you've got, let's see, 70%. Woohoo! Page 347 of 492 in the digital version you're looking at, huh?
That's pretty cool. And I'm looking at my hard copy book. Still looking for the pictures and things, but so we're on 360 in the hard copy. Okay.
360, yeah.
Yeah. So, well, we're getting along.
Yep, yep. And there's, as usual, a moderate amount of indices, bibliography, all that kind of stuff in the back. So 511 is where I see in this version where the text ends. Well, actually, that's part of the appendix, which we might want to read. It's a
Yeah, we
short
might be
appendix.
getting
Well,
close.
actually, the appendix is just what it says. It's just basically copying what it says from the course itself.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
so yeah, actually it ends on 503. So we're page 360 out of 503 in this print version. So that sounds like about 70%.
Yeah, we're moving along.
Yeah.
And yeah, I am kind of upset. Of course, I haven't looked through the whole thing, but on the Kindle version, that we don't have all the photographs, all the pictures that are in,
Mm-hmm.
because that's pretty cool. I love looking at those pictures. So
Yeah, yeah.
I see only the past. So there we go. Okay. All right. So, do you want me to read? We're reading Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of A Course in Miracles by Dr. Kenneth Wapnick, PhD.
Do you want to go ahead and start, and I'll
Yeah.
pick up whenever you're ready?
Okay. So I think we left out that Helen was a compulsive editor.
Actually, I've got it before that. Can we back up a paragraph?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Helen and Bill agreed. Let's see. Let me go back.
No, I think you had it right there. Top
Okay.
of the page.
All
Yeah,
right.
there you go.
Helen and Bill agreed that it did need a final run through, talking about the course
The editing.
in its newest as new as it was. As Bill lacked the patience and attention to detail that was needed for such a task, we decided that Helen and I should go through it together. And so we did, never realizing just how long it would take us to complete the editing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, really, I earlier quoted Helen's statement that she had come to think of A Course in Miracles as her life's work, and she approached the editing project with a real dedication. She and I meticulously went over every word to be sure that the final manuscript was right. And of course, that is all subjective, right? It's right or not. Uh, but it was in a form that they felt comfortable with. So I think that's important because a lot of people are not comfortable with that, with all the numbering and such. They like to have no reference.
And yet, if you think about it, what the numbering, the chapter, uh, paragraph, and even sentence, all those numbers that were added has made possible um, the annotation system, which has made the translation between 27 and counting languages um, very, very, intuitive, and it's obvious. So there's no, when especially the work of the translators and anyone reading a foreign language, they can basically see the English annotation, which, if as long as the numbers match, if the word for I think workbook is different in Spanish, for example. The abbreviation for that, instead of W, it's something that's something else. But anyway, but but essentially, once you have the annotation figured out in the language you're fluent in, you can go back and forth from the English to whatever language you're reading it in, and the annotation system is completely consistent, which is, I think, a real boon for international and people. Most of the, not that English isn't a popular language around the world, but a lot of people in the world don't speak English, and that way they can refer to anything that's written about the course with the annotation, and pick up their translation and know what is being referred to.
I love that part.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that makes me, I love it so much because it does make it so much simpler. Now,
Hmm.
we're reading, in another group, we're reading Never Forget to Laugh, the
Right.
book by Carol Howe about Bill Thetford.
Uh-huh.
And when she does references to the course, it's to the page number, which means that I have to get my book out and go to the page to
Right.
see what section it is and what. So
Hmm.
and that's another thing too. The page numbering has deliberately been made consistent through probably through all of the interpretations or all of the translations. Um, I do know that any one of the English ones, the page number is going to have the same stuff on it. So I think they're very very careful about that consistency. So and it's just so that we can navigate
Hmm.
and and more easily. And there's nothing I like better than easy navigation.
It's a good thing. Yep.
It is a good thing. All right. So Helen was a compulsive editor and an excellent one at that. She would not really edit a manuscript, however, she attacked it. While Helen had a pronounced writer's block, as discussed earlier, no such block existed when it came to editing something previously written. One day I was leaving the office for a luncheon appointment, and Helen was on the phone. I scribbled a two-line note telling her I was leaving and that I would be back later. Without batting an eye or losing the train of thought in her phone conversation, Helen picked up a pencil and began to edit my note. I always regretted not having kept it afterwards. At least it was a pencil and not a red pen. It was therefore all the more remarkable that she was able to resist the great temptation, not to mention compulsive need, to edit the course and, quote, improve it,
Mhm.
unquote. To be sure, some amount of editing was needed in the early chapters, which we've talked about.
Mhm.
And Helen felt that Jesus was helping her to do just that. But otherwise, she was basically able to leave the manuscript alone. And we talk a lot about those early chapters. I, for one, never found any part of the early chapters to be difficult to read. But
Me
uh,
neither. Me neither. I think it was probably more Helen and Ken's, particular familiarity with them, and I would say, and even more particularly Ken's, you know, uh, interest in the Gestalt, or the melos,
yes,
of and the flow of the text, that one of the last Lighthouse articles that was published, was actually he published two parts of a three-part essay on the melos in the course, and one wonders if a draft of the third part isn't bouncing around somewhere. I did
somewhere.
I
I'm
did have
sure
a
it
wonderful
is.
conversation with Jeff Seibert the other day, which I posted on ACIM blog if anybody's interested, with lots of links to all the things at Foundation for A Course in Miracles, and highly recommend people check that out. It was really more historical than content wise, and I'm hoping Jeff will agree to doing further conversations. But it was a short but great conversation, and I posted a ton of links of things that are resources on the facim.org website. Obviously, there's plenty of things on the FIP website that I'm even more familiar with, having worked on that website myself. But both of those sites have just such a tremendous depth and breadth of helpful and inspiring information for every course student.
I know, I love it, and it's so useful, so beautifully put together. So thank you, and I appreciate all of it.
Oh,
Um,
sure.
so
Well, yeah, and again, kudos to Jeff and Rosemary, and obviously Ken and Gloria, and all the other people, Laurel, and a bunch of other people that worked and are still working at the foundation now in Henderson, Nevada, um, keeping Ken's work going and continuing to publish new material that's being transcribed from the archives, and just a lot of great work. So definitely worthy of every course student support.
absolutely, and I know you do, and I do as well. Send like monthly, uh, as much as I can. Basically, I'm not
Sure,
a rich
sure.
person, but
And
you
and and
know,
the really easy way to do this is when they come out with new titles, if you get on their email list and it's something you haven't read, it's like, and it rings a chord. It's like, well, just ordering the new releases, or some of the prior releases if you don't have them,
yes,
and there's
absolutely.
certainly a depth and a huge depth and breadth of material there that you can draw from.
Yeah, I have many, 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 many of those.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and they're not expensive.
No, very reasonably and priced, and also, um, what we did, oh, over a decade ago now, I think, when we first started doing our Saturday morning conversations, reading through a number of those 1,300 plus Q&As in the frequently asked questions, which is now available as a PDF for just a pittance. Um, I mean, that just gives you a hint of the depth and breadth of material that's in the FACIM archives, that's available for everyone to make use of. Yeah,
Yeah, it is amazing. And
yeah.
wow, yeah, that was something going through all those Q&As, and I appreciated so much your willingness to do that.
Oh, yeah. And we certainly didn't go through all of them. I think we really just scratched the surface there too.
Yeah, but enough of them that it was really very helpful to me. So,
Yeah, yeah.
and let's face it, I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing this because, I think you need it.
Well, when we're capital S or uppercase S selfish, as in real selfish, we recognize that, we benefit directly. And because minds are joined, everyone else does too, whether or not, others that what we think of as others are aware of it really is irrelevant because in truth, no one has left that perfect oneness, and we're just dreaming that we still have uh, obstacles to peace and barriers to sanity.
Yeah, well, we're just so silly. I love that word. So silly. All right.
Truly silly.
Silly, silly. Silly, silly. Uh, so speaking of silly, okay, the editing was not without its humorous moments, despite Helen's obvious discomfort, and there were quite a few of them. Helen's now almost legendary anxiety surrounding the course was probably never in fuller force. While she most definitely wanted us to complete the editing project, she nonetheless would find almost any excuse to distract us from sitting down and doing it. The project took us considerably longer than it had to because of these delays, circumstances not too dissimilar from the dictation of A Course in Miracles itself, which clearly did not have to consume 7 full years. We did most of the editing either in Helen's offices at the Neurological Institute and Black Building, at my studio apartment, or at Helen's apartment, the last being Helen's favorite place. Thus, we would often sit together in her living room couch, on her living room couch, and work. Invariably, however, Helen would start to fall asleep. We would be editing, and suddenly I would look to my left, and there Helen would be slumping in the corner of the couch, her usually very alert eyes practically closed. Very often, the sleepiness would be accompanied by pronounced yawning jags that made speaking almost impossible.
Hmm.
And then there were the times when Helen would simultaneously begin to cough as if trying to expel some foreign agent stuck in her throat. At these moments, Helen would begin to laugh at the obviousness of her ego's defenses, tears streaming down her face as she did so, in accompaniment to this very well orchestrated anxiety fugue of yawns, coughs, and laughter. I could not help then thinking of the end to Wagner's prelude to Die Mastersinger, where three themes combined in a masterpiece of light-hearted contrapuntal writing. I'm not sure what that means.
Counterpoint it's an adjective meaning counterpoint, like
Okay, yeah,
where you
look at
have
here.
several themes that are all playing at once, but they complement each other.
Isn't that something? And we
Yeah.
can just look it up right here.
Um,
Music
Johann
of art.
Sebastian Bach was a master of counterpoint, for example. If you just listen to
Yeah,
just about anything he did, the counterpoint was amazing.
yeah, exactly. So the good nature of Wagner's music was mirrored for me in the gentle humor of Helen's ego diversions, at least this aspect of them. So just amazing, yawning, coughing, and laughing. I would love to have seen that. I'm trying to get a picture in my head uh, of Helen going through all of this. But anyway. There we go. And then there was the time we were returning from the medical center, walking on 14th Street from 8th to 3rd Avenues, on our way home to continue the editing. We were literally in the middle of 6th Avenue when I brought up an editing question. I received no response and turned around, only to find Helen on the ground again, laughing heartily at herself. There were no potholes or crevices in the street that could have caused her to stumble, but there certainly were the inner potholes of fear that periodically reared their ugly head to trip Helen up. In this case, the only real victim was Helen's pantyhose that tore in the fall. To be hit with such uh, experience that you fall down in the street uh, in the middle of Sixth Avenue. I'm sure they were just walking down the street, and she just fell down, laughing at herself. That's crazy. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh
Yep.
my gosh.
Muy loco.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
that's, everyone's crazy here, right?
yeah.
We're all
But
insane.
who of us could actually laugh at ourselves like that? Or even to the point of knowing how silly we are. Gosh. Helen was a much different kind of person than a lot of people make her out to be, I think. And I just love reading this because, you have to have some like like semblance of um just knowing the absurdity of your
Hmm.
situation to do that, to be able to laugh at yourself that much, to actually, I mean, I know I laugh at myself a lot, and I just think it's because I'm silly, but maybe that's natural. We have to laugh, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The whole reason we're here, we remembered not to laugh.
And those same moments are when we remember to look at our defenses without condemnation, without blame, and just say, wow, how silly that I'm afraid of the peace that's behind that resistance, behind those defenses, behind the coughing fits and the nodding off and the whatever mechanism that we use to avoid looking at the truth of our real identity that we all share with everyone. Huh?
Exactly, exactly. And that's it. It's that the last unanswered question, do I want to see what I denied?
Yes,
Because it's the truth.
because it is the truth. Huh?
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Because then, you do have to laugh. And that's what Dove always says, you got to laugh. So, yeah, yeah. Okay. So, do you want to read? A major
Sure.
focus is where we're at.
Yep. A major focus of our work was the early chapters of the text. We went through at least two complete edits of these and many, many partial ones. As indicated in part two, the first weeks of the dictation were characterized not only by Helen's extreme anxiety and fear, but by the informality of Jesus' dictation to her. The conversational tone of these sessions, coupled with the personal material that was interwoven with the actual teaching, made the editing very difficult. Well, that kind of ties into our previous conversation. It seems as though, and I have not read the Urtext, so I may be speaking completely out of turn, but it seems like most of the personal material to Helen and Bill was in the first five chapters, or give or take. In which case, maybe that's why the early editing process was particularly challenging for them, given in particular Helen's concern of having her professional career derailed if what she was doing with the course got out. Her public persona and her private persona in that regard. It was very much a, a schism, a severance story, if you will. And yeah, we've been watching the really silly Apple TV series called Severance, where they do a brain implant to swap out a person's work life and home life as they go up and down the elevator to work each day.
I've heard about that. And is it pretty good? It sounds like it might
It's
be
actually
good.
very clever and has some interesting parallels to the split mind idea that's in the course and the links that we go to maintain that, and how obviously it's fraught with problems and it's some of it's kind of scary, some of it's kind of funny, but mostly amusing. When we look at it with the course's perspective that we're all trying to keep the separation going. We're trying to keep the severance severed.
Yeah.
But there's no severance payoff, if you will. Bad pun intended, right? Yeah.
No severance payoff.
Okay. Well, let me start that again. Uh,
Well, let's hope we're not a federal worker right now because we might be hoping for a severance pay.
right.
Good
Yeah,
God.
we could get off into that
I
topic very
know.
very
It's
easily.
crazy.
But anyway, yeah. Suffice it to say that we have a tyrannical megalomaniac ruler in our mind called ego that is running every personal self's show, and that's the real cause of our upset, right? Right. Because that
Absolutely.
a meaningless world ruled by the ego engenders fear, right? Okay. A major focus of our work was the early chapters of the text. We went through at least two complete edits of these and many partial ones. As I indicated in part two, the first weeks of the dictation were characterized not only by Helen's extreme anxiety and fear, but by the informality of Jesus's dictation to her. The conversational tone of these sessions, coupled with the personal material that was interwoven with the actual teaching, made the editing very difficult. As briefly mentioned above, stylistic gaps were left when the personal material was taken out. Incidentally, the miracle principles that properly begin the text did not come point by point, but were interspersed with considerable other material, as is apparent in the excerpts cited in chapter 8. I remember half jokingly asking Helen at one point to suggest to Jesus that perhaps he might redictate the early chapters, but it was clear that this was not going to be done. We thus did the best we could in reorganizing this material into coherent sections and chapters that would fit in with the text as a whole. And kudos, Helen, Ken, Bill, whoever else contributed, because I think it's an incredible document. Yeah, needless to say. A discerning reader can sense the difference in tone and style as the text continues. Roughly the current fifth chapter of the text marks the one such dividing line, after which the text was dictated pretty much as it is found now. Personal material that came afterwards did not present the same editing problem. As I commented above, as I commented above, for it was not so interwoven with the material of the text itself. That's helpful. Kind of like a little sidebar, it's clearly delineated as a sidebar, when you're writing an article, or a pull quote or whatever, it's like, okay, now I know that that's, to be read later, or, you know, pause and then jump back to get the real flow and the context of the work, right?
Right. And boy, we use those sidebars.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, our basic procedure was that early in the morning, I would read through the material we would later cover that day, or review our previous day's work. I would pencil in those corrections and changes I thought were necessary. Helen and I would then go over these together, after which I would go back over what we had done and represent this to Helen. The procedure went back and forth in these early chapters until we felt it was the way Jesus wanted it. We both felt his presence guiding us in this work, and it was clear for the most part that our personal preferences and concerns played no important role in these decisions. Bingo. And I think that's, as Ken points out, when Helen got her little s self, her lowercase s self, out of the way, what came through was stunningly clear and brilliant and cohesive. Um, not always in the form, but certainly in the content, huh? As Ken would be quick to point out.
Yeah, yeah. And just the knowing of the content was what should have made this editing a lot easier because you could probably easily discern which was which.
Hmm.
But yeah. So and this also, there are so many people who, I mean, I have literally heard teachers of A Course in Miracles, big organizations say that Ken did not believe that Jesus wrote the course. That
Huh?
Ken did not believe in Jesus.
They
That
obviously
Ken,
never studied any of his work.
I know. Uh,
He probably has as many programs, audio, video, and otherwise, on Jesus, as any other topic that you can think of. I mean, I've got a pretty good collection here, and at least a dozen titles that are focused on Jesus, and what the Jesus of the Course is, and how it differs from the historical or biblical Jesus, and all the other Jesuses of the world. Tim Wise, tip of the hat to Tim and Lynn at Corona and School for Course in Miracles, in his now yearly immersion program, will usually spend one session on the different Jesuses of the Course.
oh,
And
that's
the one that
cool.
follows this, immediately after we're done this morning, will be after last week's session on the fake Jesuses, or the counterfeit ones, essentially, that are basically the ego's sanctioned ones. Um, we'll get today to the ones that really represent, well, the one really, which is not a symbol. It's not a symbol. It's really the reality. Well, obviously any Jesus is a symbol, but it's meant to represent the reality of our inner kindness teacher, aka Holy Spirit. And the label that we put on it is totally irrelevant. I mean, you could call it Rumpelstiltskin or Maynard T. Lelgeblad or whatever. It
Whatever.
what doesn't matter. That was from my cousin Brian, who I know is probably not listening to this, but he had a high school principal with that name. Anyway, but yeah, the form doesn't matter, right?
No,
Yeah.
because as the song goes, it's your own personal Jesus.
Yeah, and it's really that part of our mind that we took with us into the dream that Ken says as long as it's an ego-free presence in our mind, that works. It doesn't have to have any other criteria other than that, right?
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And anyway,
So I pick up where I left off.
yeah,
I'll back
continue.
up a
Yeah.
sense or two. Helen and I would go over these together, after which I would go back over what we'd done and represent this to Helen. The procedure went back and forth in these early chapters until we felt it was the way Jesus wanted it. We both felt his presence guiding us in this work, and it was clear for the most part that our personal preferences and concerns played no important role in these decisions. Very helpful. I added the qualifying phrase, quote, for the most part, unquote, as Helen did feel that Jesus allowed her the license to make minor changes in the form as long as the content itself was not affected. Another bingo, right?
Hmm.
It's always about the content, never about the form, which is why the translators of the 27 translations of the course were encouraged, nurtured, and helped tremendously by Ken to keep translating back and forth, um, with third parties to make sure that the idioms and everything that was used really kept the content consistent, even if the form obviously had to change because of the language difference. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I believe, and I may be mistaken in this, that in order to actually be given the job as a translator, that they had to have actually gone through the whole 365 lessons. That may or may not be true, but I think that that's probably wouldn't be a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
Okay. Okay.
continue.
So, yeah, this license extended only extended itself to questions of punctuation, paragraphing, capitalization, and minor word changes, such as, in parentheses, such as switching, quote, that, unquote, for, quote, which, unquote, and vice versa. See more below, a footnote or something, but never to the inclusion or exclusion of important material. Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah,
Several times during,
I was just thinking, I'd also heard that a lot of times Helen would change things because it met her need for uh, like style.
mhm,
So, the iambic pentameter,
right, right.
and all that, that they maybe the need for uh what do you call it when they all start with the same letter? Anyway,
Alliteration.
alliteration. Yeah, that she had this kind of focus on that. So a lot of times, it may have been one word, but because it didn't meet the that particular standard for her, that she would actually change the word to something that did. I don't know if that's true or not, but maybe they'll tell us here. Maybe Ken will tell us.
I'm finding my favorite alliteration that was left in the uh, the FIP workbook instructions on their website. Let's see if I can find it real quick here. Oh my gosh. DuckDuckGo search isn't finding it, but I'm sure I can find it quickly if I go to the acim.org. I have fun with wordplay, as you probably
Yeah, I
noticed.
know you do. So,
So when they asked me to write, in very few places, some things that explain how to use Felix's wonderful um, ticker tape. I put in the workbook lessons overview. I'm going to put that in the chat here. And I just had fun with it, and they haven't taken it out, so I I'm taking that as an endorsement. So anyway, for if you look at that page, acim.org/workbook-lessons-overview, and you scroll down to the second bulleted item, which is calendar daily lesson, uh, I put for the shortcut because the ticker tape, the little quick story, which I probably mentioned before, was that Tam Morgan said, there's got to be a ticker tape on the website. And oh, I forgot to, hold on, I did the wrong thing. Um, History recently posted. Okay. Well, anyway, if you go to that page, uh, for the calendar daily lesson instructions, it says shortcut, tap the ticker tape text to take today's tutorial. So I figured that was pretty good alliteration. That's probably my Ken wanted to be remembered for the ego being or the world being a maladaptive solution to a non-existent problem. Well, I guess if I'd like had to pick one alliteration, this would be the alliteration I'd like to be known for is tap the ticker tape text to take today's tutorial. So,
I
and
have
that's
to
what you
tell you,
do.
I did that this morning. I swear to God, I did that this morning. The very thing, and
Yeah.
and that was the first time I ever tapped the ticker tape.
There you go. But what was so funny about that is Tam was it was she had this inspiration. It's like, well, there needs to be a ticker tape scrolling across right underneath the header on the website on every page. And I thought, okay, at first I thought, well, sure, whatever, and as we were rebuilding the site, well, better part of a decade ago now, and and um and finally, we're going over the Google Analytics and like, well, what is 99% of the people go to the website for? They want to read today's workbook lesson, right?
Yeah.
So that was the obvious thing to put in the ticker tape. And it's like, oh yeah. And so Felix programmed it and it just turned out beautiful. And and then the Todd, the graphic artist, had this wonderful little luminous iridescent ribbon for it to be scrolling in the back to be in the background where the text is scrolling. Anyway, enough of that.
And it's
A
gorgeous.
little
It's so
backstory. Yeah, yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. Just
Oh,
just some
yay.
fun. Yeah. So, meanwhile, let me finish that paragraph. Well, I think I did.
Yeah.
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 Okay. So I'll just start that paragraph again. Several times during our editing, Helen would recognize a word that she had changed from the original dictation and that she and Bill had not caught in the original initial editing. So we changed those words back to the original ones. I was impressed throughout by the integrity with which Helen went about the editing. I've already marked on the ferocity of her editing when it came to professional writings, and yet she was able to resist such compulsivity during the editing of the course. Well, that's a good insight, isn't it?
Yeah.
Any changes we made in the order of material, in parentheses, I've indicated earlier how certain paragraphs were moved around. We showed Bill, who likewise shared Helen's attitude of absolute integrity and fidelity to the original dictation. Bill usually was most uninterested in the form, but I remember two strong exceptions. Helen had told me how insistent he was that the final inspiring paragraph of the text, and now we say Amen, not be broken up, and that the full paragraph be on one page. He continued his insistence with the published edition, although it naturally fell that way in the typesetting. Second, Bill insisted that there be 50 miracle principles, even though in the original dictation there were only 43, later changed to 53 in the two retypings by Helen. Again, this kind of insistence was unlike Bill. In these numbering changes, incidentally, no text was added or deleted. The material was simply rearranged. So we have maybe we have 50 states of mind. I don't know. Who knows what
Yeah. And it's really
trying to read
interesting.
meaning into those specifics is probably fraught with silliness. Huh?
It is. Well, but it's what makes us feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And, it made Bill feel comfortable. It made Helen feel comfortable. And Jesus, well, no, not Jesus, John Lennon tells us whatever gets you through the night, it's all right. So,
Yep.
I get those two confused sometimes, Jesus and John Lennon. But it is real interesting if you have other versions of the course, which I have numerous of them. Um, that yeah, when you're reading those, I would not have even recognized them as being the miracle principles if I hadn't have known that that's what they were, because there's so much. Uh, Explanation that goes along with them. And so, that they were able to pull them out and make them consistent, and make 50 of them, I think that's, pretty clever on their
Pretty
part.
neat, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So do you want me to read?
Sure.
Okay. And do you have to leave early today? I'm going to ask you that earlier.
No, just, a minute or two, but that's
Okay,
probably, yeah.
that's good. All right. So, a cute yet strange aspect to our editing recurred every once in a while when, after reading a particularly difficult passage, Helen would turn to me in laughter, exclaiming that she did not have the remotest idea what the words meant. And so I found myself in the rather unusual situation of explaining the course to the person who, on another level, understood what it was saying more clearly than anyone else possibly could. Thus began my first experiences of teaching this material. So he was teaching to Helen what she already knew because she was the one that wrote it down. But imagine you to be in a situation where you're writing things down that you don't even know what they mean. You don't even know what it's saying, but you wrote it yourself.
Hmm.
I think that one of the most compelling parts of this, and where you might look at this and say, well, yeah, she was just making it up. She was not. She had no idea what the hell she was talking about. And she says that, I think in that one little interview with her, she said, I didn't have the slightest idea of what this meant. This was a thought system that was completely foreign to my own thinking. And I mean, that when it's like you're writing something in a foreign language you don't even know.
Hmm.
uh, but that's exactly how this course came across. So yeah, what an amazing situation to be in, to uh to have that. I don't know what this is, but I'm writing it down. Yeah. And now Ken has to explain it to me because I don't get it either. But for him to be able to teach it, to help her to understand it, I mean, that's how we learned, this course is really written, is that teaching is, learning, and that you have to teach it in order to actually understand it, hear it, listen to it, have it make any sense to you. And that's why we encourage people to teach,
Yeah,
because,
yeah. A- And
that's,
I want
yeah.
to say, have a tip of the hat to Dove, who over a decade ago, when we met in San Francisco at one of Rev Tony's uh, conferences, and I had just heard about the ACIM Gather. He encouraged me to get on to this forum and this venue and start sharing what I found helpful about the course. And so, thank you, Dev, for that. And shortly thereafter, I realized it was much more fun to have a conversation than just a monologue. So that's why Lynn and I have been doing this for over a decade, I think now.
It's just so cool because, yeah, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, and part of the reason I'm grateful is because at the time we were doing it strictly on Pal Talk,
Uh-huh.
and you had a Mac, and it didn't work so well for you on Pal Talk.
Right,
So we
right.
had to figure out another way for you to be able to teach and share, and we started doing it on Skype.
Uh-huh.
And then when we started doing on Skype, we found out, hey, two of us could do this together. And that's how we ended up coming together. And man, what a coincidental, crazy. I mean, that, you would become one of my most cherished companions in dealing with this course.
Well, likewise, likewise,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
And it all works out, and we we don't see the bigger picture because we're here in our little amoebic pond, thinking we understand the universe, crawling along the bottom of a leaf in a dark pond of a dark murky pond, thinking we come around the corner and see a little bit more light filtering through way up above from the surface of the water and say, oh, now I've seen the light. I understand the cosmos.
Oh my gosh, Amoebic Pond. That sounds like a character in Doctor Who. I don't know if you know Doctor or follow Doctor Who.
I haven't watched all those, but I know of it more than super versed in it. I know there's people who are probably Doctor Who junkies that could quote line and verse, but that wouldn't be me. But
That would not be
it
me.
is fun. Yeah, yeah,
But I do love and
yeah.
Amy Pond. Her name is Amy Pond.
Oh, okay, okay.
So Amoebic Pond.
Oh, I, yeah, interesting. I
Uh,
would have
yeah.
never made that connection.
Yeah, well, if you hadn't seen, if you didn't know Amy Pond, you would not know that.
There you
But
go.
see,
Yeah,
I'm a Doctor Who junkie.
okay.
Uh, but I can't quote, only see things that remind me of things that happened in Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And what a incredible series that is. Anyway, uh, so
And of course, I guess the course would be the doctor of what, right?
yeah,
Since we think we're whos, and the course tells us we're a mind, which is a what?
what and how.
Yeah, and how? Exclamation point.
And how. Oh my
Yeah,
God. Okay,
purpose is everything.
that's right.
I was just reading that this
Uh, let's see. Oh, okay. So you want me to read?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
So interestingly, when in the presence of someone else attempting to explain the course, Helen would be quick to recognize the inaccuracies of the explanation. Likewise, she was expert in helping other people understand, usually in a therapeutic context, the application of the course's principles to personal situations. She, however, very rarely explained to others what the course said, directly or indirectly, except for two instances that I recall. In one, Helen tried to help someone understand how God could not have created the beautiful lake setting we were in at the moment, and the importance of metaphysical teachings such as that for appreciating the message of the course. And in the other, when at a family dinner party at the home of Louis's sister, Helen attempted to explain to her very Jewish relatives the importance of not judging Hitler and the Nazis. These were relatively rare examples, however, for in general, Helen's anxiety about its thought system caused her to leave the actual explanations of A Course in Miracles to me. Oh my God, they must have thought she was insane sitting there with her Jewish family saying, well, you can't judge Hitler and the Nazis. I'm sure she didn't say it that way,
Well,
I mean, I mean, who would the world agree was the greatest villain of all time?
and it shifts from year to year and even moment to moment, doesn't it? I mean,
Hmm.
given our personal little dreamscapes, right? But if I can remember that, so that whatever a decade or two ago was another political figure, for me and probably for a lot of people, and maybe it was one political election cycle ago for others, and and yet if I can remember that whoever I'm demonizing at any given moment, by seeing them as a demonizer, we're in the same boat. We're both using the ego thought system to make the dream of fear real. And um, as that middle review lesson for today is, that a meaningless world engenders fear. The meaningless world is the problem, and it's really my decision for the ego, which is the problem, which has made up a meaningless thought system, which then projects into a meaningless world, and so we're doubly removed from sanity, like with the double shield of oblivion. I just have to look at how much I want to believe the ego's propaganda, which is not coming from my TV or my digital device or whatever. It's coming from my mind, and it just is reflected in the the things that I see around me and experience and hear, and that seem to reflect the ideas that I've already chosen. And so if I spoke not of Christ to you or somebody on the screen, then you're not going to speak of Christ to me, as the course puts it, right?
Right. And if I notice you're not speaking of the Christ to me, then I should be going and looking at what I'm saying to you,
Yeah.
rather than saying, "Oh, well, are you screwed up or what?"
Uh-huh.
Uh, because it all comes back to me. And again, today's lesson, after all the looking at the meaningless world and the meaningless uh, situation, everything that we've given all this meaning to, when you look at it from the very last section of this, which is, let me get this up here because I closed it for some reason. uh, we're talking about, I have seen a meaningless world, it's upsetting me. And then number 5 is, my thoughts are images that I have made.
Hmm.
My thoughts are images that I have made. And, these images, they're concepts. And, I've made of myself a concept. I believe that I'm a thing. I've made of the world a concept. I've made of God a concept. These are all concepts. And he's saying these concepts are made up,
Hmm.
and they're not. This is why, all this meaninglessness that you're seeing is because you have made up thoughts, concepts that are not real and
Yeah.
have no effect whatsoever, except in the mind of the conceptual believer.
Hmm. I
So
was just thinking that projection makes perception is another way of reiterating that fifth lesson
yeah,
today. My thoughts are images that I've made. So the images being things that we typically ascribe to the word perception, are the result of the projection of the unconscious, unfounded guilt out onto the world that no ego wants to look at. And so we need to look calmly, placidly, serenely with the Holy Spirit at the insanity of the ego, see that it has no effect on what is our eternal identity that we all share. And from that perspective, wink, we basically got to the cause, which is a mistaken idea, a misinterpretation of reality. And once we see it's just a correctable error, then the sin, guilt, fear, and all the horrific attributes that ego would ascribe to that error disappear.
yeah, it seems so simple.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, simplicity is, what is it? It's difficult for twisted minds.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, okay,
And of
so
course,
let's see.
untwists them.
Yes, yeah, it's untwistable. Okay, so the paragraphing, punctuation, and capitalization, which rarely had any bearing on the teaching itself, nonetheless became a major focus of our work. One obvious reason being the distraction value they held for Helen. During her 2 retypings of the text, Helen imposed on the manuscript her peculiar idiosyncrasy of having most paragraphs be 9 lines, almost always regardless of the content of the material. So this is where she's got an idea of this form that
Right, right.
really has no relationship to the content.
Hmm.
Um, uh, Helen thankfully did not object to our correcting these, probably because she knew it was silly. More
Hmm.
than one reader has commented on the course's use of semicolons, which often were used in the place of the more proper colon. This too was Helen's preference. And as we began to go through the text, I discovered that Helen had 2 philosophies, philosophies, excessive and minimal. I cannot recall, in parens, he says, denial sometimes serves a merciful purpose. Into parens, I cannot recall how often when Helen would suddenly decide on a comma philosophy change, well on into the editing, I would have to go back to the beginning of the manuscript to change the commas. In the end, we arrived at the decision to over comma. in the hope that this would be of more help to a reader already having to struggle with the difficulty of the course's concepts, not to mention its often complicated sentence structure. I am not sure to this day how consistent we were, and in parentheses, there are still some changes I would be tempted to make, as I am sure many students feel should be made as well. End of parentheses and semicolon. However, the content of the course was never jeopardized as a result of our editing.
Yeah. So the course is helping us become less comatose
Yeah,
to the sanity of our inner kindness teacher, right? So,
that's
and
right.
on that note, I'm going to say thank you, Lynn, for another wonderful hour of sharing from Ken's wonderful work, and look forward to seeing you next week on the same time, same frequency.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bruce. And
Likewise.
you have a great week, and
You
we
too.
see you next week.
Likewise.
Love you,
Bye.
my friend.
Likewise. Bye for now.